Okay. All right, so I think we can start. We might have a few more people who will be walking in through the door. We have a few people online. The session is being recorded, so keep that in mind. Oh. Keep that in mind, and yeah, let's get started. So this is the room where we're talking about reproducibility at RDA and beyond. The session is being hosted by the Reproducibility Interest Group. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we know and what we need to know about reproducibility both at RDA and beyond, and some of the work that we've been doing. So my name is Limor Peer. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Reproducibility IG. And on the screen, not right now, but in the Zoom, you will see some of my other co-hosts who I'll introduce in a minute. And we're all going to talk to you today in kind of this hybrid format. Some of us will be, most of us will be on Zoom, and I'll be here, and we'll make it work. So I wanted to mention our collaborative notes, which we would love for you to open up. You can see the bit.ly link there. There's also a QR code. All right, so can we get the slides up? There we go, perfect. Yeah. And also, in case you get stuck and you miss this slide, if you go to Whova, I think that those are, you can link to that from the session link. You can connect to the notes as well. It's 4FJML, yeah, sorry, ML7Y. Awesome. So just a couple of like quick notes, since this is a hybrid session. So there's a general RDA code of conduct that we're all obligated to. As we mentioned, we have collaborative notes. This is helpful. The session is being recorded, but we also are asking for your ideas and your thoughts and comments. And that's a great place to put all of that. Welcome, come on in. Is in the collaborative notes. It serves us as a record, a good record for this session where we can also collaborate. So there's some Zoom rules over here, but we're going to skip over them. You know the drill, and we're pretty informal here. So if you need to speak on Zoom, please don't worry about interrupting me, and just jump right in. And same in the room. If you have any comments, any thoughts, anything doesn't make sense, please let me know. So the agenda for today, we basically have sort of three main parts of the conversation. We're gonna take you a little bit through the Reproducibility IG. Welcome, come on in. What we're about and what we've done so far. We have a little bit of a fun activity for all of us to do. We can each do individually. I'll get into all of that. We'll have an explanation. So don't freak out if you're not the kind of person who loves to work in groups. You can work in a group or in a pair if you want, or you could just do stuff on your own. And that'll be kind of the middle part, and then we have a discussion at the end. My co-chairs, as I mentioned, are remote. We are a global, multifaceted team, and they will be joining us from different continents. So Claire Austin is Senior Scientist, Government of Canada, and Claire is going to be joining us from Ottawa. Lauren Codwalder from PLOS is the Open Research Manager. She'll be joining us from London. Mandy Gooch, Arts and Sciences Data Steward at the Research Data Management Core, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, will be joining us from Chapel Hill. And I'm Limor Peer. I work at Yale University, as I mentioned. I'm affiliated both with the Institution for Social and Policy Studies as well as Yale's Data Intensive Social Science Center. I want to give a shout out to some past chairs who have helped bring about the Reproducibility IG and help us get to where we are today. Most recently, Tom Honeyman, who was at the ARDC, till recently was instrumental in getting the Reproducibility IG off the ground, as well as two of the original founding co-chairs of the group, Bernard Schutz and Victoria Staden. who were really instrumental in bringing reproducibility ideas to RDA very early on from the inception. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Claire, who will take us through a little bit of the history of RDA Reproducibility IG and how we got to today. So Claire, take it away. And let me know when you need me to advance any slides.
Okay, thank you very much. We're on slide number 5 here. Thank you for the introduction. So reproducibility, nice little diagram here. Reproducibility data and code means that the final data and code are computationally reproducible within some, I would say, within some tolerance interval or defined limits of precision and accuracy. What does that mean? A third party will be able to verify the data lineage and processing, reanalyze the data, and obtain consistent computational results using the same input, raw data, computational steps, methods, computer software, and code, and conditions of analysis in order to determine if the same result emerges from the reprocessing analysis. Then, what does same mean? So same result can mean different things in different contexts. Identical measures in a fully deterministic context, the same numerical results but differing in some irrelevant detail, statistically similar results in a non-deterministic context, or validation of hypothesis. So all data and code are made available for third-party verification of reproducibility. So also, note that reproducibility is a different concept from replicability. In the latter case, final published data are linked to sufficiently detailed methods and information for a third party to be able to verify the results based on their independent collection of new raw data using similar or different methods, but leading to comparable results. Okay, next slide.
Okay, can we see the slide and just the speaker? And that way they won't obstruct part of the slide. So Zoom can see the slide now? On Zoom? All right. Can you all see the slide on Zoom? Okay, perfect.
Very
Okay.
good. Okay, so established in 2014, some number of years ago, and then the interest group that is, and then on hiatus from 2019, and reestablished last year, 2023. Next slide. Yeah. So during that hiatus, focus was on cure fair, specifically the key issues of curating reproducible and fair research. So built on prior work and only includes standards and practices that enhance the publication of archival preservation of fair and computation and reproducible research compendium. Next slide, please. So last year, the RDA plenary renewed interest and an updated charter for this interest group. Next slide, charter. So reproducibility with respects to data sets that require codes, what we're focusing on. The goal of the interest group is to build bridges with the many efforts addressing reproducibility. And we may also start working groups, one or more working groups to develop recommendations and solutions. Next slide, please. So the objectives of this interest group would be a forum to discuss RDA developments around data and code relating to reproducibility, to discuss development and adoption of tools, workflows, and computational infrastructure, to develop an agenda to increase the reliability of the scientific record and reduce irreproducibility. This group is informed by FAIR principles: fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. FAIR principles: open science, data integrity, artificial intelligence, for example. Next slide, please. Oh, no, that's it. That's my, I'll pass on to the next presenter. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claire. So I'm up next. I'm Lauren Cadwallader. I work at PLOS. I'm one of the co-chairs of the group. And I'm just going to run through... Limo, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me okay? Okay,
Yes.
I apologize. I apologize, Lauren. We had a few people trickle in, and I wanted to make sure that they go to the collaborative notes. So we should have put another slide as a pause, but if you just joined us, please take a look at the collaborative notes. And the reason I'm sending you all there is because there is a link in there embedded that we're going to use in a little bit. But it will be shown again, but if you did join us just now, welcome. And if you don't mind, please go and register your attendance. Lauren, I'm so sorry. Thank you, Claire. I'm going to go back to, I think we were here.
Sorry, the collaborative notes, I know there's a link online. Is it?
Brilliant. Shall I carry on, Limo?
Yes, hang on, we had a question. The collaborative notes, you can get to them from Hoover.
Okay.
The Hoover has a link to the session.
I'm assuming
and at the
everyone
top,
can hear me.
yes,
Let me
we
know
can
if
hear
not.
you.
As I was saying, I'm Lauren. I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm just going to run through the history or kind of what we've been doing at the last few plenaries. So in October last year, there was the plenary that was held in Salzburg in Austria. We ran a session to reintroduce the group. It had gained chartering or chartered status in the past few months. So we really wanted to kind of introduce the group to everyone who hadn't had the chance to comment on it during chartering. Go through the goals of the group, the kind of scope of what we meant by reproducibility, and that we had some great discussions there. And we invited a few different RDA groups who were kind of representative of the types of groups that we wanted to join together, to hear about their work, what that means with reproducibility, look for some kind of connections between the different groups and the work that was going on there. We had a few different takeaways from the session, some kind of common themes that people were interested in. And these were the kind of themes that we took away and started thinking about kind of what do we want to do in the next 6, 12, 18 months with the group, and what things do other people want to work on as well. So those things were like the incentivization and evaluation of reproducibility, as well as support for reproducibility. And there seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm about learning more about the work that's going on connected to reproducibility, both inside and outside of RDA. So next slide, please. So then came to the last plenary in May. That was the completely virtual one that was online, spread over a couple of weeks. And we were trying to decide what we wanted to do. We had all these ideas about different things we could do, but we kind of we found it difficult to pick one specific theme. So actually what we decided was, that people were interested in learning more about the different groups that were working on reproducibility, both inside RDA and kind of external to it. And we thought, actually, let's start by just surfacing some more of those groups. And rather than having a formal session at RDA, we would host more of an asynchronous conversation. So the idea was that, not everyone can always attend the sessions, and the virtual RDA is deliberately spread out across multiple time zones and days to try and make it inclusive. And so we wanted to work on that kind of basis as well. So we thought if we have an asynchronous conversation, people could just chip in whenever they have time, and it works for them. So what we decided to do was identify RDA groups as well as external groups working in the kind of reproducibility sphere, ask them 4 different questions, and then collate their answers and share information about those groups back out with the members of our group. And we did the kind of sharing out via our email list and via our Slack channel. And so the 4 questions that we asked are listed on the slide. So, tell us a bit about your organisation, what's your vision, what are the challenges, what do you want to ask our members? And we had a whole bunch of really great answers from about 20 different organisations that responded to our call. Now, we emailed more than 20 organisations. Some were a bit too busy to get back to us within the time frame. Some got back to us. We don't claim that this is an authoritative list on the groups working in reproducibility. We're sure we've missed some people off that list, and that's totally not deliberate. So if anyone is working in a kind of group that's working on reproducibility issues and you're not included on the list, please let us know, and we'd love to kind of add details about your group to that list. So if you go to the next slide, please, Lee Moore, you'll see the list of the groups that we contacted here on this slide. We've got a few RDA groups and quite a few different external groups. And those external groups range from, kind of grassroots type groups who are doing it, I was going to say for fun, but perhaps, off their own backs without any kind of formal support, whereas there are other groups that have formal funding and kind of much more kind of official kind of structures and ways that they're maintained and governed. So we kind of have all this information. We shared it out kind of about 3 or 4 different groups every day of the last plenary, and we've collated it all into a single kind of overview document that has all the answers there, as well as the kind of comments that people were putting in Slack and the kind of discussions that we had around those. So if you go to the next slide, we'll just kind of quickly go through some kind of overview of the type of things we've got. So the first question was, briefly tell us about your organisation. I'm not going to try and summarise all 20 there. Instead, there's a link here that takes you to that overview document, and I really recommend that you check it out. Hopefully one of my co-chairs can post it in the chat as well. And then you can look up the different groups and learn a bit more about those. But if you go to the next slide, please. The next question about what was your vision when it comes to reproducibility, and we've pulled a kind of illustrative quote here that was kind of like I think quite a shared vision by a lot of groups, and that it's around all researchers and institutions being aware of what best practice is when it comes to computational reproducibility, and that they are incentivized to support it, to implement it, and that the tools and resources needed to facilitate it are also available. So that was quite common, about around awareness and best practice and enabling and supporting reproducibility. And of course, each group has their own different slant on that. They might be focusing on one aspect more than the others. So next slide, please. So the third question, what are some of the challenges you see towards achieving that vision? And of course, there are lots of challenges, and I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar with those already. So unclear expectations, kind of poor definitions, or unclear definitions. As Claire was talking about earlier, there's lots of ways you might define reproducibility or kind of things kind of very close to it. They all have very similar names. It's difficult to enforce community norms. There's lack of tools, lack of adoption, kind of lack of incentives. All those different things. And again, on the overview document, you can see the different specific answers. So next slide, please. So we also asked what you want to ask our members. So I'd suggest having a look through those as well, because a lot of the groups said that they are looking for volunteers or participants, collaborators to work on their projects. So if you're interested or looking for partnerships to form, I really suggest going and having a look at those different groups, because there's some great work going on out there. And then one of the other takeaways we found that the groups are generally kind of unaware of different efforts happening around reproducibility. So it's really, I think, great to start joining these up and for people to start hearing more about each other. And I guess we came away from from the last plenary, really excited about what we'd found out, but also kind of thinking towards this plenary and what can we do with this information? If you look at the overview document, it's quite text heavy. There's quite a lot of information on there, and we think it's really valuable information. But I think we would like it to be more usable and a better resource for our members and for other people interested in reproducibility. So that kind of leads us to where we are today and to what we want to achieve in this session. And I'm to Mandy for the next part.
Thank you, Mandy.
Yes.
Thank you, Lauren, very, very much. Mandy, maybe we can pause here for a minute before we continue.
Yep.
So can we see the speakers in the room? Yeah, perfect. So a couple people trickled in a little bit later, and I just kind of want to make sure everyone knows where we are, and I also want to see if there's any questions. So kind of overview of what the reproducibility interest group is about. Really, we are seeing ourselves as a forum for conversation about reproducibility at RDA and a bridge to other larger conversations and efforts and initiatives that are being done around reproducibility outside of RDA in the scientific community. And so that's been one of our objectives. And so our trajectory has led us to a place where our members, and in previous meetings that we've had, have asked us to identify what is going on in this space of reproducibility, who's doing what. So, you know, some people have heard about the UK Reproducibility Network, for example. Other people have not. Other people don't know what that is and what does it potentially do for them. Some people have heard of iRise, and some people have not. So we're trying to, and I was at a session yesterday that Amy chaired in evaluation of research, where the idea came up to let's just have a list so that we know of the different efforts and different ways of doing things. And this is very similar. We started with a list by reaching out to people and asking them 4 basic questions, getting all that information back. And now what we're trying to do is really sort of say, how can we make sense of this information in a way that's not just one long, really long Google document, like you could see in the link that was up there for the overview. So while all that is super valuable and we don't want to lose sight of it, and we have in that document every organization's vision when it comes to reproducibility, as was mentioned. What are the challenges? You know, what are they looking for? And all that is key, and there's a lot of information to mine there that we can come back to. But just as a sort of way of orienting all of us here at RDA on reproducibility, we were thinking that we would start by sort of situating these different groups in some sort of space that we can make sense of and come back to. So that's kind of the long, I guess, summary of where we are, based on all the presentations that my colleagues have given so far. And so I'm gonna ask the room here and on Zoom if there's any questions or any thoughts or comments at this point before we go kind of to the next phase of the session today. Are there things that you are wondering about? Are there things that you haven't seen yet and are surprised that you haven't seen about reproducibility you're expecting to see? Any kind of questions that you might have for us as an interest group at RDA or on the topic of reproducibility? Hang on.
And Matthew Lucas from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. As a funder, one of the things that I'm thinking about is where are the gaps in support for reproducibility? Are funding agencies supporting this adequately? I mean, we just launched a call around kind of meta-science or research on research, and we expect there'll be some reproducibility projects that get funded through that initiative, but it's not focused on reproducibility. So one of the things I'd be curious about thinking about is how can agencies support some of this work better or think about its role and importance within the broader research ecosystem?
Great question. And are you thinking of a role for RDA in this specifically, or is it just a general question?
Well, I think there's definitely lots of opportunities for interaction between this group and the Funders Forum at RDA, for example. So engaging both as a source of information, but also as a, leading a conversation with funders about how we're approaching this, but also from your perspective, are you finding particular gaps? Are there real opportunities here for us to be more proactive on this front? I just want to point out there could be a really interesting interaction there with funders on this front.
For my co-chairs, if you have any responses, I'll let you take it as well, but maybe I could just quickly say that one of the gaps that we've seen, or one of the issues that have come up all the time, is incentives for reproducibility, and we all know that funding is a big incentive. So to the extent that funders have a role, I think it could be a big role. I think that one thing that this group could do is clarify what it is exactly they should do. In what way should they do it? In other words, should it be, what is it that would be expected of them in order to kind of push the agenda forward? Is it a mandate that everything has to be reproducible, that they, you know, if they funded it, it has to achieve a certain standard? Is it a statement? Is it enough to give a statement that this is reproducible? You know, like what is it that we're talking about? Mandy, Lauren, Claire, or anyone on Zoom have any thoughts on that? Can we see like all the speakers?
Well, this is Claire.
Gallery.
I'm really happy to hear this question coming from a funding agency. Certainly, funding agencies have a very big role to play in this. Great incentive, tremendous incentive toward that. One of the things that in Canada, for example, the funding agencies that are requiring is data management plans. I think that, you know, in this space where we're talking about fair data management plans required when the funding application is submitted, and that certainly prepares the terrain for reproducible data. So, you know, when those three things are linked and highlighted by funding agencies, it's really sets the stage for compelling experience.
That's a great point, Claire. Thank you. It was a little bit hard to hear, so I'll try to recap what you said, but please correct me. So Claire works at a funding agency, and from her perspective, and it's a really good point, data management plans are a really good way of at least starting the conversation toward reproducibility, especially emphasizing FAIR principles. So, I mean, we already know there's much more broader adoption now of FAIR principles. People are talking about it. Are they actually doing it? I don't know, but it's in the air. But for funders, obviously, to be more aware, you know, reproducibility, you could argue, falls under the R in FAIR. Some people would say it extends FAIR into something that's fairer. There's a couple of R's there too. But adding those concepts and those and requirements to a funding, you know, to a grant, yeah, to the requirements could be a really good start. So great point. Anyone else? Yeah, please.
Yes, me. So I just want to build off of that. I think, Claire, you made some really great points too about tying it in with data management plans, definitely. Limor, your comment about incentivizing reproducibility, I think is incredibly important. And I want to extend off of that by saying, I think one way to really support reproducibility is not only just like funding, it's a great carrot, but actually acknowledging the costs and the effort that are required to effectively produce a reproducible package, if you will. And not just saying, hey, you'll get funding if you do reproducibility, but including those costs into the funding. Because I think like what we're seeing right now with a lot of these requirements coming out of like federal funding agencies and whatnot, particularly in the US, is they are acknowledging the importance of sharing your data, but they're not increasing the award amounts to account for the costs that it takes to do data management. And so there's a lot of frustration, I think, for a lot of researchers who are seeking funding, and now they have to somehow manage to incorporate new activities that they didn't have to incorporate before, but the amount of money they can seek is still the same. And so it does limit their resources. So I think incentivization is great, including funding is great, just expanding the award amount, I think, might help.
Quick, I'm going to give it to Amy.
Thank you. Amy Nurnberger, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I want to follow up quickly on Claire with the data management plan, the opportunity for the data management plan to be seen as more than the 2-page piece of paper that you put in your grant that you're then done with, but as the first step in that road towards reproducibility. Second, to your question, Matt, about what can funders do in this space? Kind of diverting a little bit from Mandy's point, but still going for more funds here, is to actually fund the third-party reproducibility activities, like we've seen from the NIH recently in the United States, is to be like, we didn't just say reproducibility was important, we're actually going to give you money to actively reproduce a previous study or a collection of them.
Exactly, super. And those, they are popping up, and we will talk about them. Lauren, I'll be with you in 1 sec. Dan had a comment.
Hi, yeah, Dan Katz from University of Illinois. I was just going to comment that I guess when I think about this, this comes up with in software sometimes as well, and reproducibility and fair, and was just going to say that I feel like my opinion is kind of different actually than what's been said so far. And so if you think about reproducibility in the context of a data product, being able to reproduce the data product is what reproducibility kind of means, but it's not really reproducing the work that the data product is used in. And so I think sometimes we get confused by fair data. The data is reusable for something, and that something should be reproducible, or the thing the data is used in should be reproducible, but the data itself is reproducible doesn't necessarily make sense to me, particularly if it's gathered or something like that. And it's the same thing with software, right? That software being reproducible means that you can build the same software again, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can use it to do the same work. So I think, so from my point of view, which again, I'm happy for other people to disagree with, reproducibility isn't part of FAIR, and FAIR is something that's necessary in order to build towards reproducibility, but they're different things. So.
Yes, thank you for that point of view. Let Lauren speak, and then we'll continue. Thanks. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in from my kind of publisher perspective, that I think what some of the things Mandy and Claire and others in the room have been saying is really great, because at the moment I feel like there's a lot of burden on publishers to ensure that the research we publish is reproducible, but a lot of the work needed to do that happens way upstream. And so if we can embed those processes where researchers are working towards reproducible work much earlier on, and we do that through funding mechanisms or making sure that the support costs are provided, like Mandy was saying, then it kind of makes the job of the publisher as like the gatekeeper of that research a kind of much easier lift for publishers who are also trying to do peer review and all sorts of other things as well at the same time. I will also just put a plug in here for anybody who wants to add to the collaborative notes. I'm trying my hardest to put down your ideas, but please feel free to edit them and chime in.
I would just like to.
Lauren, put in the chat again, please, the link, if you guys are on Zoom. If not, we can bring up, you can go to Whova. That's probably the best thing to do. Go to Whova, click on the session link, and in there is embedded the link to the collaborative notes. Thank you. Yeah, Claire.
I would like to follow up on the last comment from the floor, talking about FAIR. Are FAIR data necessarily reproducible? I agree with this comment that reusable does not necessarily mean reproducible. Well, you know, the FAIR movement has done a tremendous job of moving us forward. But, and you know, people have tried to say, you know, to force that other R, reproducible R, into the reusable R. But I agree with this comment, if I understood correctly, that it's not the same thing. And I'll just read a sentence from the Common Infrastructure for National Cohorts in Europe, Canada, and Africa, Seneca, which stated in its deliverable D7.3 last year in 2023, that while the FAIR principles have become a guiding technical resource for data sharing, legal and social ethical considerations, they have become a guiding technical resource. In addition, legal and social ethical considerations are equally important for a fair data ecosystem for further uses of data, and that fair data should be fairer, F-A-I-R-E-R, meaning fair plus ethical plus reproducible. That's from Seneca in 2023. Very important statement, I think.
Great, and let's make sure that's in the notes too, in case people want to refer to that also later. I think that's a great point. In my mind, and I don't want to argue about this now necessarily, and I'm not even arguing, I actually totally agree, but I just think that a lot of people think of reproducing research as closely linked to reusing the data. And so in that sense, those concepts are linked, but I understand that FAIR principles, the ability to reuse data is something, come on in, is something that stands alone, and the ability to reuse data, hi, come on in. Could be completely separate from reproducibility, and also it might be nonsensical in some instances to say that data are reproducible or software is reproducible. So it depends on sort of your starting point. Did you have a comment?
Sorry, I just want to say I was following you up until you said something about the data product or the software not being able to reproduce the same work, and I do not understand what you mean by that. Like, isn't the point of using a software to do the same thing over and over again?
So I think one of the questions is, are we talking about the output or the tool? Sorry, then do you want to reproduce the tool, or do you want to reproduce something when you're using the tool? And so if you're reproducing software, it could be that you can compile the same software using the same compiler and the same operating system and get the same binary software, and that would be reproducible software, but that might be different than being able to use the software to reproduce results in different settings. If that, okay.
Thank you. Did I see another hand here? Yes, Matt.
I just had another issue that came up in some conversations I had last week around it's all great to have tests and support for reproducibility, but if researchers aren't willing to present their data to be tested in this way, it's not going to work. And so this conversation came up in the context of journals, actually, and researchers who had noticed errors in their data and wanted to make corrections. And in one case, the journal made the correction, but then had in big, bold, red letters, like, here's the correction that was made, as if, you know, some crime had been committed by the, and so there was a conversation on how do we incorporate, you know, changes, revisions to our data in ways that recognize we're all human beings, we make mistakes. This is leaving fraud aside, obviously, but in just the amount of data people are collecting and the sophistication of some of the tools we're using, mistakes are going to be made, and that's okay. And it's great that we find them and that we you know, notice them and we acknowledge them and make whatever changes we need in a way that doesn't necessarily penalize and undermine people's careers, because that fear of that will keep a lot of people from wanting to make their data available or subject themselves to reproducible tests, for example. So guidelines, for example, for publishers or funders on how to treat some of the stuff might also be helpful.
Can I suggest that that is something that the interest group might want to take on, is guidelines for publishers on this issue of what to do when there are some errors or when research is shown to be irreproducible. I'll also say my own personal bias, which is maybe related to kind of that funding question that we had before, which is maybe we want to kind of verify and do those checks before we publish. Like, that would be good. Get it going at that point. Not to say that things might not be irreproducible later on for various reasons, having to do with, you know, aging dependencies and all sorts of things like that. But so that's one idea that we heard. I think another idea that we heard maybe for the IG is kind of clarifying that relationship between reproducibility and FAIR principles. So I think, Claire, you're already onto that in some way with the statement that you mentioned, and but that could also be some useful output for this group. So I'm gonna stop here because we are having a great conversation, but we are also kind of out of order a little bit for what we had planned. And Mandy was just about to take us through the mapping activities. So to kind of bring us around to where we were, we reached out to groups and said, what are you doing on reproducibility? How does it affect you? What do you care about? And then now we are going to try to map these groups, and we are going to have a little activity in the room that we can do around that. So if we can have the slides back up, please.
Perfect.
Yes. Thanks, Mandy.
Yep. So this mapping activity is relatively straightforward. As Limor said, if you guys are there in person and you want to group up and work together, partner up, go for it. But you can also do it on your own, and you can also do it at any point after this session. So if you start reading through and you're like, oh, I'd love to contribute, but this is going to take a little bit more of my mental capacity, that's totally fine. So if you will click on the link, or you can use the QR code to go to the document. The instructions are pretty straightforward. So thank you for changing to the document.
I'll work here.
So if you'll see here, there's a table of contents essentially, and the instructions are in section 1. They're very straightforward. We are asking that you select a group from section 3, and we have the groups divided by internal RDA groups as well as external groups to RDA. And so you'll see in the table of contents, there are links to each one of them. You just click on it, it'll drop you right down to that group. In section 2, we have a list of categories that we created. And this is not an exhaustive list whatsoever. So if you see a particular category missing, or if you want to make a recommendation for breaking apart a category into multiple categories, we have a section called New Categories that you can add your comments and additional categories to, and we'll get those incorporated into the document. If you are going through the groups list and you're like, hey, this group is missing, and I know they do work in the reproducibility landscape, we also have a section for adding new groups to the list. So you can go ahead and do that. And if you want to provide information about them, like a brief summary, a link to their site, and if you want to include a category that you think they would fall in, 1 or all 7, whichever, you can go ahead and do that. And then you can add a brief description in there. So just to reiterate, the exercise itself is 1, you go to section 3 and you select what group you are interested in expanding on. You go to that group, there will be a section where you can select the appropriate categories that fit that group's sort of area of expertise when it comes to reproducibility. And then you can provide a brief description below that that describes how that group fits within the category that you selected. We have some examples that we've already done. I think 1 internal and then 2 external that we've already done. So you can look at those if you want. For instance, if you go to Cascade, you'll see here we have just the summary that was provided to us by Cascade. followed by the categories that we selected for what Cascade does within how it falls within the reproducibility landscape. And then a brief description of how these align, these categories align with sort of the Cascade group. So please feel free to jump around in the document, comment, add descriptions, add categories. If you have any questions, if you're virtual, please go ahead and raise your hand or drop the question in the chat, and we will make sure that it gets addressed in the room so that everybody can see it. If you are in person, please raise your hand so that Limor can bring the mic to you so that everybody on Zoom can also hear the question.
Great, thank you, Mandy. I want to just mention one other thing, which is that if you find yourself working on a group and someone else is there, don't worry. Like someone else virtually is there, don't worry. You know, we can work collaboratively. If there are people in the room who want to work together on a particular group because they know it well, they work with it, anything like that, feel free to move around and do that. Mandy, how much time do you think we're going to allow for our activity? Maybe 20, I think, or so?
I'd say 15 to 20 at this point, just because it
Yeah.
seems like there's some really good discussion opportunities here, and we wanted to kind of talk about next steps and whatnot. Just a quick thing, if multiple people are working on the same group, go ahead and keep writing what you're writing, because we can summarize the content that you put together into one cohesive description. So just go ahead and word vomit, drop all the information in there, do whatever you need to do. We'll make sure it's more cohesive and then share out the final product later on.
Right, and I'll just say too, if you're not exactly sure, I'm here to answer any questions as well as online. Or feel free to just peruse the document and read about these groups, because maybe you heard of Screen IT, but you weren't sure what they're doing, or maybe you heard of Cascade, but you're interested in what they're doing. So feel free to do that. And then if you have any comments or questions, let's put those in the collaborative notes. Maybe I can bring those back up just in case anybody needs that. Yep. I'm especially interested in any RDA groups that you know of who are working on things. So like the funders group that Matt brought up, that definitely something we could add. I know evaluation of research, we've been talking about it. We would love to get some of that in here. Even the groups on data versioning, groups on data integrity. There's a lot of activity at RDA that can be added. Thank you. Yeah. Do you want to be on?
No.
No? Okay. Exactly. Yeah, just like added under here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and again, the categories are meant to help us to kind of have a brief overview or way into a group in terms of understanding kind of their main mission and where they are in the landscape. But if there are other categories that you think are more relevant, if you see all this kind of dividing in a different way, that would be great too. Okay, so I opened up the chat too, so I could see if there's any questions. Yep.
Thank you. So I'm Christian Paget from Surfax in France. I see in the groups that there's a RDA FAIR Principles for Research Hardware IG. I was wondering if, of course, we have hardware there. They talk about software as well, because there's the FAIR for RSS for research software. I think it's important to have this as well, because if you have research software that process data, if you want proper provenance or information that you need for reproducibility, I think this information needs to be propagated to the output of those software tools, so for in-data processing. So I think FAIR for RS, I think is relevant in the same way that the research hardware one is.
Absolutely, thank you. Can we add it to the? Yeah, perfect, perfect, great, thank you. I don't know if I should bother people or not, but I guess tune me out if you don't want to hear this. There was in our previous session, someone had brought up provenance for software as an automated feature of metadata about the software, which I think feeds really well into what you're saying. Yeah.
In the software itself, but also in the data it will produce in the output. So you need metadata for the data output, but also the software itself.
Exactly, thank you. Mandy, I'm wondering if we wanted to add some of the RDA groups. We don't have to add the information yet, but maybe list them that were mentioned, like the funders group, if we don't have it listed at the moment.
Yeah, I can add that at the bottom. I'm not sure if we mentioned yet. So, I mean, we definitely did reach out to a bunch of RDA groups, and I think Lauren said that they were either too busy and weren't able to get back to us and whatnot. But if you know of any other RDA groups, feel free to add it to the new group section of the document as well. And we'll follow up with them and get more information from them about any reproducibility activities that they are involved in, whether that's producing recommendations and guidance, or they're developing tools, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely drop those names in there, and if you can provide a link, the RDA ones will be a little bit easier. I say easier, and then there's the website that's still kind of, I think it's doing much better. But if you can drop links to any of those groups, that will help us to navigate the spaces and identify more information about them. If you have points of contact that you can include, that would be even better, so that we can, if we have questions, et cetera, we can reach out to the right people. So thank you.
Mandy, do we want people to put their name next to the group they suggest, just in case we have any questions? I think if you want.
I was going to say, if they want to,
Yeah,
it's okay. If they don't want to, we're not going to
Yeah.
hunt you down. It's all right.
Yeah. You know what could be helpful? If we could put in the chat the link to the form with the 4 questions. Because some of the reason that we don't have some RDA and other groups that we reached out to listed in here is because we sent a link to a form with 4 questions and didn't hear back from everyone. Doesn't mean they don't want to be involved, doesn't mean they're not doing very relevant work. But that's something that maybe we can include in here as well. Lauren, are you keeping time? Is someone keeping kind of general time on this activity? I honestly don't know when we started.
I think we've done about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I was
Uh,
gonna say, feels like
got
about
about
10
half an
minutes.
hour
Okay,
left.
so let's keep doing this for another few minutes, and then we can move on.
Can someone post the question, no, the form, because I'd fill it out for our organization. I just, we're more aspirational, not worried, but more too aspirational to wind up in this list at this point, but I would fill it out.
Aspirational is good. Yeah, fantastic. So, are you on Zoom?
No,
No.
not, but if you post like a short link, I can copy it. Yeah, or put the link in the notes, that would work.
Yes, put the link in the notes. That's probably the best thing to do. Collaborative notes. Mm-hmm. Maybe here. Mandy, do you see my screen? You see where I am? Well,
Yes, sorry, yes.
maybe we can put the link there. I mean, you probably already put it some other places, but if you could put it there, then people could see it easily, get to it. Actually, I'm not in the right place, am I? I'm in the discussion here.
Sorry, put what link where?
The link to the form with the 4 questions.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was not
sorry.
looking for that. Sorry.
Yeah, just because we have someone in the room who can answer those 4 questions right now. So I think it's a good use of time. Fantastic. Yeah. You can also start and finish later. I could unshare and look, but I think we can probably find it. Yeah. Mapping document, yeah, so link to form for groups. So going back to our, let's see. The DLF assessment interest group, that's an RDA group, yes, perfect. Fair for Research Software, perfect. And Dan had to leave, but we can maybe rope him in to help us with that. Great. Has anybody come up with new categories? Okay. The original document that was sent out. Okay. Okay, this is not super elegant, but it's in there now, in the collaborative notes, under the activity in the agenda.
Limor, I think the form link is for our co-chair nomination rather than the questions for our
Oh,
information gathering.
the link is not the right link. Okay. Oops. All right, hang on.
It got to the point where it asked me why I would be a good co-chair.
So since
I
you
like
brought
that
it up, thank you for volunteering.
I like that this is a test of our data management skills.
Yes.
Can we find our own documents?
The truth is that the link to the form was embedded in an email that we sent out, and so I think it's a little bit hard to track down. But we will do it, and if we don't do it now, we will. Yes, that's right. That's right. All right. So while we're still working on that, I'm wondering if we should shift gears and kind of get back to our conversation a little bit. I know some people have had to leave. But I guess, and online, does that make sense, everyone? Do you think we're good at this point? I guess one question that I have for all of you is about, so, you know, we're all sort of working in the space where we're aware of different things that are happening, and we're trying to figure out a way to capture them and then make them useful for other people. So the big question that I have is the information, having looked at these groups and what we kind of pulled out from them, categorizing them, is this useful information for your purposes? And how would you use this information? What's the best way to present it? So those are the kind of questions that I have. From this mapping exercise, if we now have this Google Doc, and we can, you know, we can organize it by categories, right? So we can have all the groups that are working on reproducibility policy sort of show up. All the groups that are working on software and tools, on evaluation, on workflows, and so forth, organize. Is this useful? Would you use it? What else might you want to know about these groups? Because we started on this effort, we've asked the groups to give us information. We came up with a schema for categories that made sense to us. Doesn't mean it's like the best schema in the world. You now have looked at it and added some information. So we just really want to make sure that it's useful to the community.
I already found it useful just reading through. Sorry, I'll just say I already found it useful just reading through the group, some of which I hadn't heard of before, so that was really helpful.
And were there others that you identified that you that were not included?
I added
Or
the funders form.
you didn't?
And the funders form and funders interest group.
Yeah.
But no, you're much better informed than I am on groups that are working in.
Amy?
This is just an FYI.
Yeah.
The list of questions, it didn't go out to us as a form, it went out as a list of questions, which might be why there's not a link to a form.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right, we'll work on that form. I know that there is a form. So as far as the interest group is concerned, are there gaps? Are there other things that you might want to know about these groups besides, new groups that we're missing? But let's say that we were able to have a pretty exhaustive and up-to-date list of all of the groups that are working in this space. How useful is this? Is this a good RDA output? That would be, I guess, our questions. If anyone has thoughts, I don't know, online, on Zoom, anyone want to chime in?
I'll chime in, Limor.
Yes,
I mean,
please.
I guess having the document is one thing, right? And people can go away and read it at their leisure. I guess one of the other things I'm thinking about is how we communicate kind of updates or outputs from the external groups to RDA members. Like, is it sufficient enough that people can go and read the document, and then will you keep track of the outputs of, some of these project funded groups that, will ultimately produce reports or write articles about their findings on how to support reproducibility? Or is there a kind of role that our group might play in kind of facilitating future conversations around that? Perhaps organising talks or inviting external groups to come and have a panel discussion or those kind of things. Like, Is that ever of interest or helpful, or are people just happy kind of finding the information at their leisure?
I'm not hearing anything from the room, so I don't know if the audio kicked out again or if it's just really quiet.
Hello, hello.
Can you hear me now? Yes, okay, sorry everyone here who has to hear me again. But Lauren, I mean, I think what you're saying, like one idea, and maybe we want to add that in our sort of notes, is to maybe the categories could be useful in convening groups around these issues. So the RDA interest group could have a role in bringing these external groups to talk about their outputs, right? To talk about their activities, their recent thing, what are they doing, how are they innovating around, say, policy or around software and tools, things like that. So that would be maybe a more active way to engage with some of these things rather than going and reading a document. But I think you're right. I think we have to have that document no matter what. It's going to be there. It's a reference. It should be as exhaustive and up to date as possible. But what can we do with it or on top of it? Yes.
Hello, Leslie McIntosh. So if we're going to be real about this, the document will be read by about 5 people, right? And if it is publicly available, it will be scraped, mined, and then end up in any of the LLMs. And that gives information to people when they ask the questions. So if that information is not there in some authoritative source, and then it will pick up information from other places or make it up. And it may make it up anyway. And I don't want to get into an argument over the rights and whatnot, but the fact of the matter is that is how things work at this point. And as Matthew said, it's a really good document to go in and learn about things very quickly. I was in the reproducibility group early on, I've kind of, my career's gone a little bit differently, and it was really nice to go through and just go, oh, okay, this is what's up to date. This is what's going on. Here's where the effort is. So there's one comment on that. The other one, and just say no if this is not the right place. I'm very interested in trust in research as a whole, not just data, but trust in research. And what you brought up was part of how can we better articulate that information so that science as a whole, research as a whole, can be more trustworthy. The question is there a fit for that within this interest group, or is that somewhere different? So there's my 2 parts that aren't exactly related.
Thank you. Those are great comments. I'll just say on the trust that I mean, to me, one of the reasons why we want reproducible research is to increase credibility and trust in the research, but that can be misused sometimes or used to discredit research, which is just really hard to think about. But there are groups at RDA that work on trust, are there not? I mean,
I was looking for them and I couldn't find them, sorry. So I was looking for those groups, yeah. And it might just be because of the whole website change, because I wanted to try to put those in the doc. So if there's other people that know that and we could put that in the doc, I think that would link. And I couldn't tell which one were active. And again, I've been out of the community for a couple of years, so it's my own fault too.
I'm glad you're back.
So the word trust, it doesn't use the word trust, but I remember a couple plenaries ago, I'm not sure which one, our last in person, I think maybe, that a similar topic was brought up as well, tying more to the evaluation of research group. and like how to evaluate reproducibility to see if like these are appropriate sort of actions or services or support or workflows that are being implemented since it's not really standardized. So I wondered though if this could tie in a little bit with sort of that conversation, and maybe it is a working group effort of like investigating how to really trust when research is labeled reproducible. Like, what does that mean? How do you define it? Are there standards, best practices, whatever that should be implemented around it? Like, it sounds to me like a working group effort. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, great point. And I'll just make another little point, which is that related concepts I've seen at RDA that are not exactly on this point, but questions of integrity, but I think they really relate to like data quality. And then the concept or the term trust, which is an acronym, which is about repositories. So it's completely different. So Amy, you probably have the best view of RDA here.
Thank you. But also no. So with this idea of what is trust in research, what is trust in science, from my perspective, that's a very large question. Reproducibility is one element of that. If that is something that we are interested in raising within RDA, a different approach to that might be a group that considers and collects these different elements of trust, and through that, because I think trust doesn't simply reside within reproducibility or reside within data quality or is measured by evaluation of research, but those are each elements of trust in research, of trust in science. So approaching it from that direction might be, from a more holistic direction, might be more successful.
Super, thank you. All right, so I think we can shift gears to the last little part of our time, since we are kind of approaching the end, which is if we can bring up my screen again. We had some questions about next steps for the interest group. It's also in the notes. But Mandy just had throughout this idea of a working group to kind of explore this topic. So I think that might be an idea. So a few ideas have come up. We have a little list here of some things that have come up in the past. I would love for people to see if any of these resonate with you, and if you think that you might be willing to help kind of co-lead an effort with us, the IG co-chairs, on one or more of these topics to help us prioritize it. And in fact, I don't know if you want to add any comments. This is in the collaborative notes. You know, if you wanted to add your name, if you're really sure that you want to go and create a working group on a certain topic, or if you think that this is the top priority and this is what the interest group should focus on, that's another feedback that we would be really happy to receive. So some of the ideas for the interest group, I think, is generally to continue to kind of be involved in this activity of scanning the landscape, bridging, inviting groups, convening, being a forum. But in addition, also have working groups who will, or subgroups who will work on specific issues and have a deliverable. As you all know, in RDA, our working groups have about I think an 18-month cycle, and at the end, they sort of give us their output from their work. So one idea is reproducibility checklists. So having this in front of researchers, but also potentially in front of funders, right, publishers. Are these things present? Have these things been done? And there is already one effort underway that Claire, our co-chair, is involved in. So that is one idea. So assessment of reproducibility, I think that is one of the things that has come up and is tied potentially to the issue of trust. Best practices, especially in different contexts and different disciplines. So what does it mean to have reproducibility in computer science versus maybe in the social science where we're trying to reproduce a certain output? Metadata provenance for reproducibility, that's a question that has come up in some previous sessions. That's interesting. Like, what do we want to know in the metadata about reproducibility beyond what we know or should know about data and software? Policy and kind of like institutional questions around reproducibility, anyone interested in that? Or fill in your other ideas. So those are some ideas that we had. I don't know if anyone in the room or online wants to throw in another maybe idea. Yes.
I have a question, I think, more than idea. To one of Dan Katz's earlier points, when we say reproducibility, what flavor of reproducibility are we talking about? Is that something that this group has already defined? And if so, I'll be happy to go and read that document. But if not, there's the software reproducibility versus computational reproducibility versus data product reproducibility. And I know the title of this group is computational, but is that narrow? How narrowly, clearly articulated has that been defined, do you think?
That's a great question. Yeah, we went through it a little bit in the beginning. I think it was before you got in. That's okay, no problem. And you know, we sort of took a stand to talk about computational reproducibility and to talk about research that involves data and code. Okay, so some sort of data and some sort of computation has to happen that could be reproduced and then provide the same output at the end. Again, that might not address all scenarios, but we had to kind of, you know, yeah, we had to kind of put something in the ground to get a start. So that's kind of where we're at. And I think that that fits very nicely, obviously, too, with other efforts like the National Academies and ACM and others who've thought about it in the same way. All right, so we have other ideas for the interest group, including to tighten some relationships with. So I know we were talking about evaluation of research. We might reach out to the funders group, other groups at RDA. There might be some efforts to tighten relationships there. As far as the external groups, one idea that we've heard today potentially is to convene groups around certain categories, groups that are kind of in the same space and maybe have conversations. I love this idea of a community manager, someone who might be willing to take on that role, and you know, that's maybe wishful thinking. Someone who could go and talk to key communities, like researchers, about what we're doing here at RDA. And so those are some of the ideas that have come up before. I'm wondering if anyone has anything to add online or in the room to some other further directions for the Reproducibility IG. All right.
You mentioned this, we're doing, I put in the chat, link to the reproducibility checklist, which we have on GitHub.
Claire, could you, I'm sorry, could you fix your microphone because it's hard to hear?
How's that?
Better.
Holding wire. So you mentioned some of the work that we're doing. I put a link to the reproducibility checklist in the chat. I don't know if this is something that might be a seed for reproducibility. In any event, I'd be thrilled to receive feedback.
Okay, I think it was a little hard to hear again. Sorry about that, but Claire is leading the charge on the reproducibility checklist. If anyone is interested, that's Claire's information. Can we show the Zoom again? Can we show my screen? Yep, there we go. claire.austin@ec.gc.ca. You can also find it on our website and on our materials. All right, so please join our group if you haven't already. Please follow us. We will have updates for you. We have all kinds of plans. We can go in several directions. We'll reconvene, and we would love to have you join us for our meetings, the co-chairs meetings, to help us shape and direct where we're going to go with all of this, because it's a big topic with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of interests and a lot of activity, and we would love to have you all involved. I see one hand raised, so we'll go here.
Hi, Gaby Pino from Universidad Nacional here in Costa Rica. Maybe you spoke about that while I wasn't here. Sorry to be late. But I'm wondering how the group, because I love that idea of Federer. Yes, Federer, yes. I love it, and I think it's important. The group will be working on pushing that idea for the FAIR principle to become fairer?
So I think that the question is whether the group will be pushing for that idea of fairer as an extension of FAIR. So I think Claire Austin, our co-chair, is going to be the person, kind of the point person on that in our group. So I would suggest contacting her, or if you wanted to add or contact me and Huva, so we know your name, that you're interested, that would be great, because we're looking for collaborators and we would love all the help. All right, so join us if you haven't already. Feel free to contact us. Thank you so much for being here today, in person and online. To my co-chairs, thank you for being here remotely. And we'll see you all at the next session, I guess. Thank you very much.